child, lost in the fog, and I'm frightened of meeting all you known unknown.
Hello and welcome to Poly Risk Reward. My name is Ned Stranger, and in 2024, my wife and I received the results of a DNA paternity test that showed that I'm not our daughter's biological father. Through these podcasts, I tell the story of our open marriage and this unexpected twist in forensic detail, with each episode focusing on a common question I get about open marriage, polyamory, and this unusual situation. When I talk to people about open relationships, probably the most common reason why people wouldn't want to try one is that they're scared that their partner will fall in love with someone else and leave them, thus ending the relationship. Now, I think this is a really interesting question that could be explored on a number of levels. So on a big picture level, you have the definition of love. Is love something that you can only feel for one person? There is one soulmate out there in the 8.5 billion of us living on the planet, and you fall in love when you eventually meet, and it's destined, and they are the love of your life. And this is the paradigm that's sold by a lot of classic literature and film, and that's all very well. And if that is how we view love, then this fear of losing them to someone else is impossible. It's an impossibility because they can only love you and vice versa. Now, to answer that question, how true that is on a philosophical level, I will have to invite a philosopher onto the show. But for today, I want to explore it from a more pragmatic angle. How valid is this fear? Is there anything you can do about it? And how do Anya and I feel about it, respectively? Now, the first thing to note is that this isn't just a question about whether you want to be in an open or a closed relationship. I know people who are in open relationships who have rules designed to deal with this fear of losing their partner to someone else. So, for example, they can date whoever they want and have sex with whoever they want, but they're not allowed to sleep over or spend the night with somebody. And this is to prevent the risk of emotions developing, because sharing a bed for a night is breeding ground for these emotions, which must be avoided because emotions equals love, which equals leaving the relationship, which equals bad. Or another example is people who they can date whoever they want, but they're only allowed one-night stands. So they're allowed to meet somebody once, have sex with them, and then they're never allowed to speak to them or see them ever again. And if they do, that is a form of cheating. Whether or not you think these rules are a good thing, and I don't, they are designed to get around this problem of people falling in love with other people. So it's a question that I think applies to anyone in a relationship. However, to ask a different question, does allowing your partner to date other people or spend the night with other people or see people more than once, does that increase the risk that they might fall in love with someone and leave you? Or does it actually decrease the risk? So the way I think about it is that giving your partner freedom is a way of making the relationship stronger. And this is because in the long term, I think both people will feel the benefits of more freedom and feeling less trapped and less claustrophobic in the relationship than if they're placing restrictions and rules on one another. This is where I wanted to do a little sidestep into attachment theory. So attachment theory was developed in the 1950s to explore the relationship between infants and their adult caregivers. And for infants to feel securely attached, adults needed to be sensitive and responsive in certain social situations with them. It was only in 1987, so 4 years before I was born, that psychologists started applying this theory between adults and infants to adult romantic relationships. And this idea that how you were brought up between the ages of 6 months and 2 years especially would have a big impact on how you were forming romantic relationships later in life. On a very basic level, this then turns into categories of attachment. So you have a secure attachment, or you have an anxious or preoccupied attachment where there's this hyper focus on how much closeness there is in the relationship. Or on the other side, you have avoidant or dismissive attachment where a partner will try to keep their partner at like arm's length and need more space. And so very basic terms, there's this spectrum of needing a lot more space, needing a lot more closeness, or feeling the Goldilocks perfect amount of secureness right in the middle. So some people might say, it's all very well, Ned, that you feel okay with this level of risk in your relationship, or you don't have this fear of losing Anya to someone else. Maybe you're just very secure. But what about people who are, say, anxiously attached? How do they deal with this? Well, the first thing to say is that these categories aren't like fixed types of people where you sit in one and that's you forever. You will evolve and move along that spectrum at different points and in different relationships through your adult life. Jessica Fern, who wrote a book called Polysecure, which applies attachment theory to non-monogamy, and she's also a couples therapist and psychotherapist who works with a lot of different couples. She says, attachment styles are not static. If you experienced an insecurely attached childhood, you can still go on to have healthy, securely attached adult relationships. And she also adds, I often hear people describe themselves as, I am an avoidant, or I am anxiously attached, seeing themselves wholly through this one lens. And so I think this is a really important point. It's not that certain people are anxiously attached and therefore incapable of feeling this non-jealousy and non-fear. It's just that they might have a different process to work through this, involving maybe therapy or some other form of self-exploration. So for me, the focus shouldn't be on how you can protect your relationship from risk. It should be a focus on trust and freedom and unpacking what those actually mean. There is this really subtle interplay between freedom and trust and rules that only works if you're willing to accept the consequences of everything that you do and your partner does. It's not that you can only give freedom to someone if you trust them. It's that to trust someone, you have to give them freedom. And this is because trust is an act and a choice. It's not like a precondition of a relationship working. And that only is possible if you accept the consequences. And I think this is where I'm able to feel secure and not live in fear of losing Anya to someone else, and being totally okay when she falls in love with other people, because she does, because she's polyamorous. And it's not because of my childhood upbringing and my secure attachment style under that theory. For me, it's more that I went through this kind of self-exploration and self-improvement drive starting in late 2017. I really started exploring Stoic philosophy. So when you look up Stoicism in the dictionary, you normally get something along the lines of the endurance of pain or hardship without the display of feelings and without complaint. And this is the kind of more colloquial expression of what Stoicism is. But historically, it was actually an ancient Greek school of philosophy founded in Athens in like 300 BC. But nowadays, the most commonly quoted Stoic philosophers are actually Roman, and they include Marcus Aurelius, who wrote his Meditations, which were basically a series of notebooks or diaries when he was emperor, and a series of letters written by Seneca the Younger to his friend Lucilius. So Seneca, I think, was a playwright, but he wrote these letters which contain a lot of Stoic thoughts, and they're kind of like a series of ancient blog posts. So I started reading these letters back in 2019 when I was living in Berlin, and I found some really interesting wisdom. So in letter number 18, he writes, "It is in times of security that the spirit should be preparing itself to deal with difficult times. While fortune is bestowing favours on it, then it is the time for it to be strengthened against her rebuffs." So this idea that you're not avoiding problems in the future, you're kind of like mentally preparing yourself for them. But he also writes in letter number 9, he quotes, "The wise man is content with himself," and then writes to his friend Lucilius that a lot of people wrongly interpret this statement as, you should just shut yourself from the outside world. And what he actually writes is, it applies to him so far as happiness in life is concerned. For this, all he needs is a rational and elevated spirit that treats fortune with disdain. And my reading of this is that if you can build a sort of mental resilience to the consequences and things happening in the future, so you're kind of operating within your own mind and just trusting to what happens, then you can lead a happy life. So this is kind of how I step from that into how I think about our relationship and the fear or the risk of Anya leaving me, I'm sort of allowing events to take their course and sticking to this idea that trust and freedom is the right path. If I allow Anya to do the things that she wants to make her happy, and if she allows me to do the things that make me happy, then whatever comes of it will be the right outcome. And I focus my attention inwardly rather than trying to over-influence the surroundings or the future or events that are outside of my control. So I just wanted to leave you with a couple more quotes, this time from Marcus Aurelius, who I mentioned already. And historians think he was writing this stuff around the year 170 AD. So in the 10th of his notebooks, he writes, "Remember that nature has made you capable of enduring anything, as long as it is up to your judgment to render it endurable and tolerable by representing to yourself the doing of it as either advantageous or your duty." So if Anya falls in love with someone else and leaves me, and, the marriage that we've built over 5 years is over, then I would have to reformulate the situation in my mind as either advantageous or me doing my duty. And in this sense, I do feel it is my duty to her to enable her to make herself happy by giving her that freedom, and vice versa. That is what our relationship and what love means to us. In his 4th notebook, he also instructs himself to be more like a headland, so like a cliff sticking out into the sea with the waves beating against it. And he says, rather than thinking that it's my rotten luck that this has happened to me, instead we should be thinking it's my good luck that although this has happened to me, I still feel no distress, since I'm unbruised by the present and unconcerned about the future. So whatever happens, it is up to you to build that mental resilience to withstand it and embrace it, whatever it is and whatever your process is. And if it's good enough for a Roman emperor writing in his diary, then it's good enough for me and good enough for Poly Risk Reward. Thank you again for listening to this episode, and I look forward to seeing you all next week with another interview with a very special guest.
You're just growing old, waiting for the fight to unfold. And now underneath the building's bare there many teeth, and steel and glass and false belief rising up and leaving you behind.